Hello? Oh, there we go. Ooh, sorry about that. I thought we were starting at 9:45, so maybe I'll just have to talk a little bit faster. We're here to talk about driving agility with observability and value-driven behavior. If that's not what you're here to talk about, there's a good time to escape now. All right. My name's Jack Maher. I'm with EPAM. Quick shout out. If you've never heard of EPAM, neither had I till they reached out to me. But I want to thank them for not just sponsoring me, enabling me, but actually encouraging me to be here today. If you haven't heard of EPAM, check us out. We're probably the largest and most interesting company you haven't heard of in the technology space. We're going to talk about a handful of things today. We're going to start off just touching base on agility because I might not define it the same way you do. Hopefully we'll all agree on something here. We're going to talk a little bit about observability because what I have to say a lot of people won't agree with, but I think you might. Then we're going to talk about value-driven behavior. I think it's the most important thing we'll talk about today, and I think you'll find it to be very consistent with the things that you already think and believe and feel. We'll talk about synthesis and transparency. That just sounds really cool, doesn't it? So I left that title here. We'll talk about more about what I mean when we get to that. And then we're going to talk about so what. So most of us are probably in the technology space here, right? We're thinking about SAFe. We're thinking about Scrum. Personally, me and my teams were more JAD and XP, but I've also worked in a lean product space and a lean startup. And those are all so similar that a lot of times people didn't even know that we weren't doing what they thought we should be doing with the 3-3-5, that kind of thing. What we're really going to focus on, and one of the things I like to do with the manifesto, the 4 and 12 we just talked about, is to take out the word software and replace that word with value. And then it makes sense to everybody. But it's more than just doing that, especially in today's world, right? There's a lot of data, and we need to work with that data. We need to understand that data. And when we're able to put that together, that's what really derives this agility that we want to get after. We need to be able to use data and adjust and move forward and do the right things to deliver the most value to everybody in this proposition. Oops, wrong direction. So let's touch base on agility first. I don't care what flavor of Agile you use. I'm not a fan of 3-3-5. I don't care about SAFe, less, DAD. I don't care about that stuff. What we do care about is being able to respond quickly and easily when we need to. Over the past 10 years or so, maybe a little bit longer, what a lot of us refer to as professions, our jobs, our domains, have become much more similar in a lot of ways. We've seen that all of the foundational practices that we tend to use in these kinds of domains increasingly move more and more towards value delivery or value basis and people-driven processes and the way we think. Being iterative, we don't do this long, big bang serial thing. Even those of us that are still in a mostly waterfall world still are breaking those down into smaller waterfalls at least. And most importantly, we've gotten away from this toss it over the wall. You know, it used to be a long time ago that people thought that there was animosity between operations and software developers. And to some degree, maybe there was. Because we didn't look at things the same way. We were fighting against each other. And the part that doesn't get talked about very much is we were fighting against ourselves. At the beginning of the technology development space that's happened over our lifetimes, at the beginning, we were incompetent. Let's face it. We had no idea what we were doing. We were unconscious incompetence. We didn't even know that we didn't know. But we've gotten better and better and better. And now we've gotten to the point where we don't just have to look inside and hope nobody else figured out that we didn't know what we were doing yet. Now we can reach out to them. and help them with their part and get help back from them as well. So this collaboration just wasn't really possible in the past, mostly because of who we are as people. Observability, that's the part that's difficult right now, because when we go out on LinkedIn, when we look on, into the trade publications, we have a whole lot of people that are selling us observability solutions right now, don't we? And I'm here to tell you, there are no observability solutions yet. Observability means to be able to be seen or noticed, right? It doesn't mean I have to know what I'm looking for. Observability is about being able to see what I didn't need to know that I looked for. And most importantly, if agility is our ability to respond to what needs to happen, observability is what lets us see that so that we know that what we're doing is the right thing. Or if it's not, then we need to change. You might recognize this, maybe not out of context, from The Matrix. Mrs. Tank observing, I'm not sure, 17 or 18 screens to see what's going on with Leo. Is this observability? Anybody think this is observability? No, not even close. We need a visualization breakthrough. We don't have it today. If anybody thinks differently, I really desperately would love to hear from you, and let's talk about it. Because monitoring has gotten really good. Dashboards have saved a lot, but that's not observability. You got to be looking for that. You got to understand, you have to interpret it. Distributed tracing, not observability. Getting us there. Some of the blocking and tackling that we have to do to truly get to observability. I'd submit to you that we haven't gotten to observability until I can see something that I didn't know I needed to see. That's observability. If we put this into the context of driving a car, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, we drove our cars by looking in the rearview mirror. We got a bunch of reports that were a day old at the freshest, and maybe further back. And along came dashboards. Great, we can see how the engine is running. We can see how fast we're going. We can see if we have enough gas. It didn't tell us where we're going. We need to see through the windshield. We need to have some idea of what's going on out there. Oh, there's a wall coming up. We should stop or turn, right? I didn't know that. Reports aren't going to tell me that. Dashboards aren't going to tell me that. So we need to work on this. We need help with this. But let's talk about what we can do until we get that observability solution. The first thing that we can do is get ourselves into a position so that we can address that observability, so we can tell folks what we need. I also want to help us with what are the things that we can do that will make that usable, that we can drive our organizations with that. Number one, we need to find in our teams and in our organizations our domain. What's our common purpose? What are our shared values? It may be something that's noble. We're going to learn to climb mountains so we can do a better job of rescuing people when they need our help out in the forest. Our focus is going to be on what do we need to do as a team. We care about these people. So you're going to be our primary navigator. You're the person that really can help us get to where we need to go. And you're going to be the person that coordinates with the medical teams and the rescue services. And you are going to be the person that makes sure that we're doing the right thing from a safety and climbing perspective, right? We all have this thing that we're going to go after together. Now, it doesn't have to be noble either. We are going to drive the best hedge fund. We're going to make the highest returns. We're going to have the best safety net. We're going to do whatever it is we're going to do, but we're going to do it together. And we're going to find these shared targets, these values that are important to us. We have these shared goals. We also, because this is something that we care about, we're not going to be just satisfied with doing okay, the bare minimum. We know that there are always things that we can do better. And part of this will be to help us grow together, to find those improvements, to find out that the medical conversations need to be better in terms of what we're actually seeing from a triage perspective, or how we could treat from a address injuries issue. We want to get better, and we can help each other by saying, you know what? I needed you to be more precise with your navigation on that last one, right? Or, we have now had 2 times in a row where we didn't have sufficient supplies. We need to change what we're doing. So we push each other, and we also have aspirations. If we have this shared vision that we want to bring to each other, we then also need to show where we're going. And what do I need more of from you? What do you need more of from me? We can help each other. Now, as we look forward into the observability, we have to understand how this machine or organism works. What comes in, what goes out, what are the processes? One of the big challenges we have right now is that our models are non-existent or they're super simple. And the problem is that we are very complex organizations. We're very complex organisms as people. So we need to be able to build out these models that we can use. And the challenge sometimes is we start too simple or we start too complex, and then we don't build from there. The best is too simple and elaborate as we go. Progressive elaboration, right? Focusing on outcomes is something we've been talking about a lot. Who here hasn't used the term OKRs in the past week? Nobody, right? But we've also talked about KPIs. Which ones do we really care about? KPIs are usually easy to count. OKRs are more important, tougher to count. But that's where we need to go. We need to find the measurable ways to get to those things we really do care about. We don't care about lines of code. We don't care about function points. We don't even care about story points, honestly. But what we do need to do is find measurable ways and make that observable so that everybody can see how we're doing. And then the part that gets dropped, I think the most, is the communications. How are we doing? Where are we in this process? Are we getting better? Are we getting complacent? Is our journey still headed to the same place? Maybe we decided we wanted to change our direction a little bit. Or maybe we wanted to do something else. Maybe we wanted to add water rescue into our team. And we need to get scuba folks involved. All in all, by spending time together as a group, by learning together, sharing together, we build that vision. And it's not just my vision, or your vision, or their vision, but we continue to hone this together. And you can't have taken a business course in the past 20 years without running across your friend Peter Drucker. And you've probably beaten up on him once or twice, and most of our professors have too. I kind of prefer Damon Edwards. And I think I've heard this quote from several different folks. If you don't know who Damon is, he really is one of the godfathers of the DevOps movement. Do yourself a favor and go on YouTube and look for Damon Edwards DevOps. You'll learn a lot more about DevOps than you think you will. And it's a quick hint, it's not about tools. But what Damon said is that maybe you can't change culture directly. But what we can do is change behavior. And over time, behavior becomes culture. So sometimes we see folks, especially when they're first adopting Agile, I don't care what flavor you pick, at the very beginning, they're definitely going through the motions, right? Fake it till you make it. Or maybe what's even worse, sometimes we have what we heard about this morning of people who feel like they have to cut corners, people who feel like they can't actually do the whole thing. Then we're not doing it right. We're still in the fake it till you make it stage. But that's okay, because eventually, even those fakers will begin to fall into those processes. They'll fall into those rhythms, and they'll move from the fake it till you make it, even if they don't mean to or not actually really trying hard to do that. But here's, I think, the part that people miss the most, and it's kind of sad because it's the most important part, is when we're asking people to do something, when we're asking people to change what they're doing, the first question that's going to be in their minds, consciously or subconsciously, is what's in it for me? If you don't have an answer for that question, well, it's okay, because they'll find an answer to that question. And if the answer they come up with isn't the answer that you want them to have, then that could be a problem. Now, one way that you could do this and know kind of what that answer is going to be is by knowing that person. By actually spending time with people, by asking questions and understanding what is important to them. Because if we know who they are, if we know what they care about, then we might be able to influence their perception of what's in it for them. And let's talk about something else, about pride in craftsmanship. Is that something that most people want? Do they want to feel good about their work? Do they want to feel satisfied with what they have done? Do they want to contribute in a meaningful way to something that they care about? If the answer to any of those questions is yes, then we know what's in it for them, don't we? That's why we're asking them to do this, because it aligns with one of those things. The pride of craftsmanship can come across in different ways. And there are two really close models that I like to refer to. One is either in a group like this, probably talk about COHAA, right? Or in another group, we might talk about apprentice, journeyman, and craftsman. Because they're really the same kind of journey. They're about investing yourself. But there's more to it than that as well. There's this progression. And one of the things I really like about the trades is that there's a strong social element as well. This learning community, this group of folks that have the same kind of skills and passions and interests that can help those apprentices become journeymen. And then some of those journeymen will have what it takes to go from the ha to the re, from the fully functional practitioner into someone who can see beyond what we're doing and doesn't just follow the rules, but begins to be able to make the rules. When we see people make that progression and we give them the tools and the space to do it, that's what leads to pride of craftsmanship or pride of ownership. And that is what is in it for me, for most of us. Again, if you're in a noble organization, that might be super simple. But it doesn't have to be. There's nothing wrong with making money. If we're going to be the most profitable hedge fund ever and we're all aligned in that same goal, we're all willing to do the work, we all have our piece to pay, that's fine. It works just as well. So you don't have to be putting meals in stomachs or saving lives for this to be worthwhile and something that will drive your behaviors. Now, that also drives then shared values, right? We're in this organization together, we're doing this together because We think of the same way, or at least enough. Hopefully we don't all think exactly the same way, but enough for us to be able to say, hey, we all are in this. And you're going to do your part, and you're going to do your part, and I'm going to do my part, and together we're going to make this what we want it to be. We're going to go where we want to go. Now, we also typically focus on creation of value, and that's what most of this measures. But we also want to be just as passionate about that delivery of value and all of the things that have to happen in order to be able to deliver the value. And then the last thing is about value targets. I suggest that is a way that we can set our goals. We can have our objectives. These are the things we're going to do now. We commit to doing this work. But what's next? Right? We sometimes talk about stretch goals. We talk about aspirations. In this case, we can frame that crisply for our folks by establishing value targets and all of their contributions to that shared cause then layer into those shared targets. And we have this consistent story. We have this consistent thread of this is who I am, this is what I care about, this is what I do, this is what we're doing, and this is what we're going to do next. Becoming value-driven, again, not rocket science, not complicated, but sometimes kind of hard. Let's start off with the most fundamental piece. And actually, my Uber driver and I were just talking about these first 2 points this morning. Respect and humility. They cost us nothing. Zero cost. Why wouldn't we start there? If we begin with that, we have a solid foundation. And how deep do you want to go? Well, our hedge fund managers are probably not going to get to the level of love, unless it's love of money. But the more we can associate, the more we can build our relationships, build our caring and empathy on this level, the rest of it is purely paint by numbers. And we've got a pretty good start on that. Let's look at these practices. As we talked about earlier, there's been a huge convergence and focus on value, on iteration, on people. And every one of these practices give us tangible ways, specific things that we can do that will cause behavior, reactions, assumptions, and get us along this common path. The same with enablement. We're building things, we're implementing services that enable us to do these practices better, that are founded on these values. Now we have a lot of opportunity to liberate people, to address toil, so they can focus on those things that we really care about. And then again, we can create our value targets from here. What are the cultural values of our group, of our organization? How are we expressing that? How are we demonstrating our cultural values? Are we improving on value creation, on what we're delivering, how we create it, how we get it there, how we follow up on that, how we go to what's next? And last but not least, value creation networks. Something I talked about at SDCon earlier this year is how we can leverage these formal and informal networks within our ecosystem, right? We can actually look out to folks like our PR teams and investor relations and begin to see how they've already begun to build out these networks of other organizations that may not be directly affiliated with us, but have some affinity with us. Maybe we're serving the same groups. Maybe they care about some of the folks that are in our domain. But to leverage those out, to deliver, and to consistently look at how we can band together with other folks in our ecosystem to build entire chains that will help whoever it is that we're serving. But we really need to get to some data to do all this, right? This has been a little bit fluffy so far. You know, we've got some practices we can point at, but where do we go from here? Well, we're talking about a whole lot of data here, aren't we? So the first question, especially when we're looking at the outcomes that we care about, are, can we even get the data that we need, that we're looking for? Step one. If the answer is no, here's where we start our focus. Okay, let's assume that we can get it. We have the data, it's accessible. Can we see it? Can we get to it? If not, why not? That's something we could fix. It gets tougher as we go from here. Now that we've got this data, do we truly understand it? If we have any data folks in the room, they could probably let us know that we generally don't really understand what we have. We may not really even have what we think we have. But we need to understand if this is data that we can use. Can we get to it? Is it viable? Will it continue? We may be there in some of the more important areas. Now we get to where it's tougher. How does this data work in terms of a model? What are the drivers? What are the impactors? What are the outcomes? How much of this do we actually understand? Is this a complete black box for us? That probably won't work very well for us. We really need to understand what's going on here. What are the impacts? Where do they drive? And then what happens from there? And then, once we understand how we can use that data to understand our model and where we are, then we're in a position to be able to do the synthesis. What if? So if we go back to our car analogy, we don't have anything in there right now that tells us where we're going. Now, maybe you've got a built-in nav, or we're just going to ignore Siri for a moment. But how do we even know? The challenge becomes, or maybe the model we might consider, is that if we use the nav on our phone, the Google Maps, we do then have a way of seeing what we're doing. And in fact, the what if option there. This is the fastest route. This is the route with the fewest tolls. This is the route with the least traffic. Once we begin to be able to look forward, we can not only look out that windshield, but we can look out that windshield with the knowledge of what's on the next block. So that's, I think, where we really want to get to with all this. Now, how far away are we? Well, the good news is that a lot of value stream thinking, a lot of agile thinking has already started and is growing. Our monitoring is getting better and better. We talked about the distributed trace before. There's a lot of great tools out there, and we're within striking distance. And value stream management has literally gone from an idea back in 2018. There was nobody even in that space. Maybe TaskTop. They weren't really calling it that then. Now, it's an entire category for Gartner. So we're in the heyday, probably in the hype cycle of value stream management. But we got a long way to go. There's a ton of manual stuff out there. There's a ton of legacy stuff out there. So how do we automate that or instrument that so that we can draw upon, use that, leverage it? The models, as we talked about, our world is complex. What we do is complicated. So the models are hard. And there are a ton of unknowns. Known unknowns and unknown unknowns that we'll need to wrestle with in getting these models straight. And whether or not we can actually compute all of this. By this point, we're approaching the kind of data that's like meteorology. That requires tremendous compute capabilities. We're going to have to figure that one out. Can we get it? Yeah. Can we get it at a cost that makes sense? We're going to have to work on that. And then visualization. That's, I think, the biggest trouble place right now. It's not that our user researchers, our user designers, our experienced designers don't want to do that. We can't even tell them what we want right now from a visualization perspective. That's why we all need to work together on this part, because we need to figure out, we need that breakthrough. And tossing it over the wall to user experience and user design is no more fair than developers tossing the code over the wall to operations and saying, good luck with that, let us know when it's running. So we have to make this a much bigger conversation. Now, I don't care, as I said before, about what flavor of Agile you're using, but I do care that you're continuing to get better at it, that you're not being complacent. Because what happens when you get complacent? You get lazy, and things stop happening. And people forget why. People don't see the value. The other part is to make sure that you're focusing on value, not the things that the reports or your bosses want to see, but the value that you're actually doing. If you're not familiar with Simon Sinek, let's fix that today. Simon Sinek and his golden circles. If you haven't run across that, please Google Simon Sinek as well. Simon, S-I-M-O-N, Sinek, S-I-N-E-K, and his golden circles. Because that will really help you and your team focus on those things that are of value to you. Make sure that we're clear on what those definitions are. What is the value that we're delivering? It's not compiled code. It's never compiled code. What's the value that we're delivering? And then what's that entire value stream, right? We're not doing this on our own. It's not a solo operation. Everybody else needs to be involved with this. And how much are they aware of what we're trying to do? How much are we aware of what they're trying to do? How can we help each other? We can't if we don't know. We can't if we don't share the same values. So we need to understand that nobody is good at anything when they first start. Nobody, ever. So start with where you are. Let's get better. Let's focus especially on how we are creating and delivering the value to those that we serve, and how are we demonstrating those values that we hold. Those are the things that we should focus on. So, I submit to you that organizational agility is really based on us being able to see and together drive towards that value that is the outcome that we aspire to. If this makes any sense to you, if you'd like to see more about this, I have a couple of books out there that address this specifically. Otherwise, this has been Driving Agility with Observability and Value-Driven Behavior. Anybody have any questions, comments, concerns? Anything they'd like to talk about? Thank you very much. You've been a gracious audience.